Alice Fogel is the Poet Laureate of New Hampshire. That sounds like a cushy gig, right? Well, let's look at what the job entails. She teaches at Keene State College and Landmark College, where she works one-on-one with students with learning disabilities. She has taught introductory and advanced creative nonfiction and has designed courses such as on death and dying, pursuit of happiness, sense of wonder, and community and identity. She facilitates courses and programs at schools and in communities, working with both children and adults. She consults with teachers on curriculum. She has also conducted a long-term creative writing course for the mentally ill at Riverbend in Concord, and judged literary competitions, edited literary magazines, including the Antioch Review, and is a writing mentor. English as a second language, piano and other music and theater arts, summer camps, counseling of troubled teenagers. Alice has been involved with all of these and more. In her spare time, she likes to backpack the Appalachian Trail. Her third poetry collection, Be That Empty, was a poetry bestseller, and she's the author of the how-to book, Strange Terrain, on appreciating poetry without necessarily getting it. Among her awards and honors, she has held a National Endowment for the Arts Individual Artist Fellowship, received the Alligator Juniper Award and the New England Poetry Club's Verugen Award. She's had poems published in journals and reviews and won prizes too numerous to list here. Oh, and she won a Works in Progress grant for a YA novel from the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Her book, Interval, Poems Based on Bach's Goldberg Variations, won the Nicholas Schaffner Award for Music and Literature and is forthcoming in March 2015. No doubt she's due somewhere else in a few minutes, so please join me in giving a very warm welcome to the very dedicated Alice Fogel. And after the reading, she'll be signing books in the Festival Bookstore, sponsored by Phoenix. Thank you.
Thank you. It's so scattered. Nobody wants to sit near anybody else. Oh, I'll try to make it a little balanced. How does this sound if I speak like this? Is this good? Okay, all right. Don't want to shout at you. So I'm going to read some poems from a couple different collections, and I'll start off with ones from Be That Empty. Be That Empty, by the way, is part of a quote. I'll read you the quote. It's from Rumi. But it's not given us to see the soul. The reed flute is fire, not wind. Be that empty. So this poem is called Starting Small. It looks like we're in for a storm this afternoon, and this is about a storm. Starting small. Amidst such violence as the skies, with its unshielding cracks, its unwieldy enormity crashing through and lighting up our bones, amid its steady, ongoing, thrumming, unrelenting, forever drumming rain, its laughing erosion of skin and lash, of wooden deck, of riverbank or garden edge, of tact. How do the lilies, even the little alyssum, remain sloping upward, neither cowed nor overturned by such a tumbling downward of whipping water and wind? Or the birds unquestioning under their wings, or the squirrels merely paused between two seeds, everything standing to meet the outcome, the downpour, unrepentant, unafraid. The reins rope downward, the reins all swing on the guffaws of air. A light with random flashings of fire, the raining air explodes, abstract element transforming into sound and sense beyond magnetic fields, electric forces, the friction of heat on frost, of clouds on high. In the doorway, envious at the threshold, I will myself to lean upward into it, like a stem to enter up into its need to plunge on down, its utter love of release and repeat. In fact, the wild frightens me, although I choose it. Although wet, I step onto the floating grass, catch on the darkened bark of trees that at any second could split at the seams. I am only human, and falling hard from heaven to earth, the teeming sky is too much air for me. I want to start again, small. Tonight, after this storm passes over, let's heave open all the sodden windows and doors. Let's switch on the electric lights, one for each room at least, and host the afternoon's damp aftermath of moths and gnats, the siren song of mosquitoes wanting only a taste of what we hold inside, the silent tune of bat food in search of warmth and salt. Their simple greed so pure, their fragmented plenitude like rain's abundant scattering. Let's listen to their ping and preen breezing in the halls and pattering on lamps, the din of insects negotiating the plausible distance from ceiling to floor. So little they ask of us, really, so little we're willing to take. I live in New Hampshire, very close to the Vermont border, down by Bells Falls. And so a lot of my poems in this book, which are about, sort of country living, lots of time in nature, will be pretty relevant to Vermonters, I would think. This one is about boiling sap for maple syrup in March. And we did this in a sort of a funky operation outside with just like a tray kind of over a fire. And at the same time that we were doing this one night, it just so happened that there was a comet in the sky traveling through. And so what ended up happening in my writing this poem was that the two things kind of went together in the night sky, and the sugar being boiled in the sap. So it's totally okay if you can't figure out which one I'm talking about. They kind of bled together. It's called Sweet Vein. Breathe in the trail of its light, ice river vaporizing from light years afar and melted from the spilling dipper. Now taste this. A water bathed with the sweetness rising, released, the sweet abundance of stars instilling dark with its white sugar grains. Boiling, boiling, all night the smoke billowing milkily, clouding the cold bellows of snow, the breathing below freezing after a day's bright thaw. Dark, darker, the syrup darkening under midnight's departing moon, the comet moonlighting, the sap moonshine. Come dip your long-handled cup across the eastern branch of sky into this steam, into this stream of liquid dust sailing through the open vein. A splendid suspension to sip at lips dark and wet, to raise up, drink in, swallow. So this next poem has a little story behind it. It starts off with somebody jumping out of an airplane And so this is all was a sort of a third-hand story that I heard. So a friend told me about another friend who did this thing where you do a kind of a training, and then you jump out of an airplane with a parachute, and the point of it is to literally take a leap of faith in order to teach yourself how to not be afraid of change, and to overcome your fears. And when you do this, they videotape you as you're falling. So she came down and she talked about the experience and how incredibly peaceful and beautiful it was, how she just felt more calm and more at peace than she'd ever been before in this sort of tunnel of air that she was moving through. She felt embraced. And then she watched the video of her falling, and she was screaming the whole time. And she could not make sense she couldn't reconcile the two experiences, what she was seeing, this video of her, looking completely freaked out the whole time, and what she thought she had felt. So when I heard the story, I tried to imagine what that would be like. I tried to put myself in that position. So we do this thing when we write, we pretend, we make believe that we are a thing or another person. And I came up with something that echoed in me what she had experienced, which you'll hear about. There's one other thing here about the Empire State Building that you'll hear, which is actually really true. I read this in an article in the paper. I won't say any more about it. So it's called The Gift. When I decided to jump, first I waited at the door of the buzzing precipice for the wind's hand to stroke me, brush me, make me give way like an avalanche. Already in that high plane, I could hear the opaque hum, the ohm of the world becoming. I thought I might be like that sound, bursting my own stillness and birthing my own self. I might be the shout, like Joshua's, that shattered old Jericho's walls. So, one leaf, I broke into the open book. I entered the hourglass and began to sift down the vertical corridor of my fall. Once, a man leapt from the 84th floor, suicide story of the Empire State Building, and the updraft placed him almost gently onto the ledge of the 85th. For reasons of my own, I did not change directions. I fell like a long strand of pearls slipping. I fell like a row of faces down a totem pole. Soon I thought I was a circle, a wheel, the emptiness that loves the cup, the way identity loves the mask, for visibility, for good measure. I thought I was a sensation on the wing, or a golden string unsceining through the straightened maze of my fall. Then I lifted my umbrella inside the house of air, and my heart slowed to the weight of a feather on the scales. Once giving birth, able and one, dividing and still one, I thought, I can do this. This pain is all mine, and I can take it. I want it. I was calm. Maybe I knew, too, I was screaming. So it was in my fall. The silence I knew there of the willingness of pure air to hold me inside it for once, for a while, for now, was unspoiled by any terror born on the wind of my voice. And I finally took flight. I knew it at the last moment before I landed, when a tiny moth, fully formed, flew up past me from some last unknown place between the ground and me, and because afterwards, when I laid my body down, something inside it kept on floating and turning in the sky. I'm going to take a break from that and read you a couple of poems that are a little more challenging for me to read and maybe to listen to as well. They're from a new book that I'm just finishing up, which is called A Doubtful House. And it's about long-term marriage, about living with somebody in the same house for a really long time. In which, so I'm exploring how borders get crossed, how the poems are actually on the page as a way to sort of illustrate what I think happens. Like, so they have, let's see if I can hold one up for you to see. That would be visible. So they don't just use the left-hand margin, they use both margins, so like the walls of a house, and the lines reach out towards each other, and sometimes they shrink away from each other. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes there's lots of space. So, and that's sort of like mimicking, I think, what we do sometimes with people we live with for a long time. And also the grammar, the syntax is kind of overlapping. So sometimes a word will finish a sentence or be its own, a phrase might finish a sentence, but be its own phrase, and then it might start another sentence. So even that is overlapping and confusing. So, and so in the series of poems, I'm addressing all these different aspects, the challenges, the love, the loneliness, the anger, all of that in this collection. So, the first one is called Birds, House of Birds. Anything that would be helpful for you to know. If you live in New England, then you probably know about glazing windows, double glazed windows, holds the heat in better. Houseplants come from tropical places like Hawaii. So things like that you'll see in here. So, House of Birds. One winter day, a bird flies into the house when it was only air you wanted. And what was it that the bird wanted? Maybe the wild, viney passion flower that never flowers in here where it makes itself. At home, you have 4 safe walls, and you can't wait to leave, to flower elsewhere. Then you don't, and you just want their limits. The bird finds the doorway you open for it and is gone. And then, as if everything else flourishes, attracts its opposite, turns inside out, 2 birds through the smallest opening you left now are in the house. You don't even see how they can fly so fast in so narrow an option. They take no time to home in on every potted, out-of-place plant trancing on its tropical roots, volcanoes, rainforests, heat, and beaches reaching toward double-glazed windows, in turn leaning against zero warmth, from which spring limb from limb will rise, as if death were not so much a boundary as a border, someone you know you are a pattern of contrary habit, a patter of wings at both sides of a door. What is the opposite of 2 birds in the house? The opposite of love. So I'm going to read 2 more of these. I have to say that a lot of this is fiction. So it's not necessarily about my 26-year marriage. A lot of it is, but after having written a bunch of these poems, I had to look around the house and say, okay, what have I not? Oh, I haven't written anything about the closet yet, or I haven't got the kitchen sink in there yet. Or I might have asked, what kind of emotions have I not done yet? And this one came about because I didn't have like a really, really angry one yet. So this one is the angry one. It's called House of Arson. You don't know Jack built this house around your volatile pain, refers to yourself in the third person, periodically flares up without a functional fire extinguisher. There is no pronoun, for the house is conscious of being your illusion, an illness that doesn't let you feel settled, despite how you choose to believe you can be in the house every time you burn it down in your arsenic rages, hot, then cool down, gather up from the toxic ashes the nails you need to raise the next house around the same unstable mood disorder, demanding, where in hell is the hammer? Where is the skill saw in two every inch that you are separate from the house is your false construct, for not one single second person, plural, defines a relationship or a name for what you keep doing to you. Everything else is a home improvement dream project deferred, eternally finishing parts. You can never notice what you neglect to trim out the basement smoldering again. Off limits, the spontaneous combustion rags, the rusting boiler, inflated pipes and tires spinning by the explosive fuses. Spark your flinty temper is not a viable. Address your indoor life in your indoor voice. Will you file the insurance claims you null and void? By reason of insanity, your face in the mugshots inflamed. These are really hard to read because there's no punctuation. They just kind of bleed into each other. I will do one more. It's a little bit more wistful, called The Recurrent House. Where are you when you exit and enter through your strange invisibility, like a ghost on the couch beside you, the shadow of another house, another time, goes in search of a change of walls without scare tactics like do not listen at the keyholes, never open this third door, hypnotized by the mystery of a distant whirring of wheels, repeating clinks of glass. Was that a hum like the falling hush of hair behind a heavy door? Wandering, you reconsider the option to disobey, the thrill of the unforeseen consequences, till you're lost in the circular stairwells, in every corner overlap up with down and east with west, somehow an emptiness at the center where there shouldn't there be an inner chamber or at least a great hall? You're afraid, or are you hoping you might fall over the threshold, thorns on ancient roses, below a sky reminiscent of suspension bridges between recurrent dreams of endless corridors and turns over and over. You slip between shifting surfaces. Sure, you've been here before, but where you thought you knew the place of every armoire and chair, every bedpost, bare spaces, long scratches mar the parquet, or unexpected edges scrape your shins. Again and again, you could swear you hear the click of latches catching. No one answers. When you call out, no voice calls from you. Curl your hand over the knob. Believe you feel held, gripping of someone else's on the other side. So I will go back to Be That Empty for just one more. And after that, I'll read one really short new one. This one is about an eclipse, and it happened one early May when there were just really new leaves on the trees. And, you know, if you build one of those boxes with a pinhole in it so that you can watch how an eclipse works, you see the change in the shape of the sunlight through the hole. And what I didn't realize is, and you can see this if you walk along the sidewalk or somewhere and you look at the shadows of the leaves and the light of the sun coming through, most of the light on the ground is round. Even though, of course, the sun is coming through leaves of all different shapes, and the negative space between the leaves are all different shapes. They're round because the sun is round. And so what happened at this time was looking down through these new leaves. The light between the shadows wasn't round because the sun wasn't round. And it just really overwhelmed me with the wonder of it, I guess. It was like 22 years ago. Yes, that's how I remember it because my son was born right then. So I had my son with me. And in fact, this is sort of totally relevant to the poem, but it was funny. It's how I remember when it was. He was 1, and he'd come with me on my last day of school because it was kind of fun for him to come with Mommy teaching at the last day of school. And all day long, he kept kind of wilting a little, and I started seeing these like spots coming out on him. It turned out he had chicken pox. And, all day long. And it was like, I didn't want to leave because I wanted to keep watching the eclipse. And I knew he really needed to go home because he was not doing okay. So that's how I remember that, too. Okay, Eclipse. Once upon the day, the moon overtook the sun, and life on earth included everything ever made of atoms, and everything else at all that mattered. Animal, stone, cyclone, bloom, when tall trees' leaves were still new and small and drooping, leaving so much room for the strange sunlight to move through. And it did, the sunlight stroked by a darkened moon, like a hand's unbearable light touch, such that everything in this world hushed and called at once, and for a while a dim twilight brightened midday with a light so lit and drained it rang with something not unlike the ringing light of truth we didn't know till then we'd been longing for, and this leaf stilled, and this stone upturned and singing, and this space sighing with relief as the outline of moon-shaped glyphs glowed and waved on the pavement beneath leaves. A time frame created of light and collapsing the distance between planets and the interval between night and day, and all manner of other things changed and charged with the light of insight until light's own language spoke in tongues of leaves to the land, illuminating shadows where there were none, and always in the shapes of crescent moons, because the moon made moonlight of the sun that nightly gives moon its own light, until the sun, passing down its sentences to those of us who dared to stare at the ground, and there to find some filtered essence of patterned light embracing the pantheon, drew such a chiaroscuro, such a brilliant shade of light. There was a light that blinded us to rounder suns of brighter days. Let's read one more short, new one. And this one I'm working lately on trying to write in different tenses than what we're used to. We tend to write in in present and past tenses, and I'm trying to write future and conditional tenses some, just to kind of see what that feels like. So this is one. What is that?
That's the sound of books being checked out.
Oh, the sound of books being checked out. Oh, right, okay. All right. We're in a library. What can we do? All right, last poem. It's called Simple. It will turn out to have had 100 names, and we used every one unconsciously and played favorites. It will have been as if the messages had been sorted from multiples into ones. There was what we knew and what we were told and what the wind did to our skin. We will have hoped we'd been continuous, awake in our senses, and will speculate about any other possible explanation. If only we had adored harder, we will promise in retrospect, because nothing else, as far as we could have known, will have seemed so simple. Thank you.